Episode 4 starts where we left off. But then the clock strikes 12 o'clock at night, and instead of December 13th beginning, time resets again to December 12th. Dan opens his eyes. Everyone is alive. Yuji is alive. His team is alive. And now he has been given one more chance. A new loop. Now, in the darkness of night, Dan looks at his team's group chat. The comrades who all died in yesterday's blast are all alive again today and chatting normally. For a moment, Dan becomes emotional. Dan knows that today something very big is going to happen again. So in the middle of the night, he calls his chief and demands an emergency meeting. At first, the chief is irritated, but seeing Dan's seriousness, the whole team is immediately summoned to headquarters. In the meeting, Dan puts forward a shocking theory. In his view, Yuji has several public events scheduled today, and if Squid is going to attack, this will be the most perfect opportunity. The team is sent to different targets. Dan orders everyone that every movement, every meeting, and every smallest activity be reported. This time, he isn't placing blind trust in anyone. Everyone leaves, and for a while, Dan keeps looking at his teammates who are alive. The gap between yesterday's death and today's life is creating a strange pressure inside him. Then he makes a promise to his boss. This time, he'll save everyone and expose Squid. As soon as morning comes, Dan begins his investigation. He has noticed that in every loop, some people do exactly the same things they've done before. But some people's actions change, and in his view, the people who change either are aware of the time loop or are being manipulated by some unseen force. Meanwhile, tension inside Moma Biotechnology has also peaked. After the deaths of the company's two top scientists, the entire organization has fallen victim to a power struggle. Employees are divided, and there's a lack of trust in management as well. Yuji makes an unexpected decision. He calls Lisa to his office. Yuji tells her that the company now needs a strong scientific leader, and in his view, Lisa is the person who can handle this responsibility. Lisa is surprised, but Yuji shows complete faith in her capability. During the conversation, Yuji indirectly admits that he thinks he too could someday fall victim to an attack. But even more important than the company, for him, is the genetic research. He believes that science is bigger than any individual. So he decides to appoint Lisa as chief scientist assistant and hands the responsibility of the entire research department into her hands. But the real drama begins at the shareholders' meeting. During the meeting, Yuji's wife comes with a proposal. She says that Yuji should be removed from the company's executive control on a temporary basis. The official reason is his security, since Squid is constantly after his life. An argument breaks out among the board members. Some people support it, some oppose it. The situation becomes more complicated when the Han family also votes against him. For a moment, it seems that Yuji will really lose his position. But then an unexpected twist comes. The third shareholder, Tang Jing, votes in support of Yuji. After the final vote, it turns out that Yuji still maintains control of the company. And immediately after that, he announces Lisa's promotion in front of everyone. The board members are shocked. Many people openly begin criticizing how so much power can be given to a new researcher. But Yuji makes it clear to everyone that Moma's most valuable asset is neither money nor shares. The most valuable asset is the scientists who create the actual technology. Lisa also comes onto the stage and gives a speech. She promises that no matter how dangerous the situation may be, the research department will not stop. Seeing her confidence and determination, quite a few people are impressed. Dan is observing all this from a distance, and an important realization comes to him. Some of the events he had seen in the previous loop are now changing, meaning someone has begun to influence the timeline. A little later, another strange incident comes to light. Fu Jun, the delivery worker, is being held in police custody because there was suspicion that he might have some connection to Squid. But the investigation reveals that he had only gone to Moma for his unpaid compensation. He has neither the motive nor the capability for murder. Another of Dan's suspects is eliminated. Before this, Yuji attends the university academic conference. Dan and his team are on his security detail. At the conference, Yuji openly admits that he has received death threats. But even so, he isn't willing to step back from his research mission. Before the audience, he gives a powerful speech. He says that science has always challenged the rules of nature. If human beings hadn't dared to create new rules, progress would never have been possible. While this speech is going on, Dan reaches Professor Yu Xiang's lab. The professor's behavior had already seemed suspicious. Inside the lab, Dan notices something strange. There are clocks everywhere, as though the professor has some obsession with time. The two of them talk about time and the value of life. The The professor repeatedly talks about multiplying time and its consequences. This conversation makes Dan even more suspicious. Suddenly, Dan asks a direct question. Is taking one life in exchange for another life really worth it? The professor becomes uncomfortable. During this time, Dan has already found a poisoned syringe in the professor's possession. All the evidence is pointing toward him. But Dan feels the story isn't so simple. Later, during the interrogation, the professor says something shocking. He believes that in an era of advanced science, it's wrong to leave life and death up to nature. Humanity has always rewritten the rules, and will keep doing so in the future too. These words start spinning in Dan's mind. If the professor is the murderer, then why are his actions so contradictory? And if he isn't the murderer, then who is the real Squid? In the next scene, Dan gets reports from his team that Teng Jing was in the lab area all day. And the most interesting thing is that she's spending quite a lot of time with Lisa. In the evening, the two of them are going to attend a wedding where several of MoMA's senior executives will also be present. Hearing this, Dan goes on alert. Lisa has just now inherited the position of Teng Jing's late father, Shen Rong. If Squid really is targeting MoMA's key scientists, then Lisa could be the next target. Now Dan learns that Lisa too is going to attend the Zhao family's wedding. This immediately disturbs him, because in the previous loop, Lisa wasn't part of this wedding, meaning someone has created a new change in the timeline. And if changes are happening, that means either Squid also knows about the time loop, or some other player has entered the game. To check the cake being sent to the wedding, Dan reaches the cake shop with his team. There, their eyes fall on a man wearing a helmet who is approaching the delivery cake with a big bag. Dan immediately suspects that maybe a bomb or something dangerous is being placed in the cake. The police surround the man, but a few seconds later, the truth comes out. The shop owner explains that the man is their employee and had come to put decorative sugar figures on the cake. The situation becomes awkward, and a crowd of people starts gathering nearby. At this very moment, Dan understands another problem. If Squid is observing them from somewhere, then by now he has gotten the idea that the police are reacting in an unusual way. And if Squid comes to know that someone already knows his future plans, then he'll become even more cautious. On the other side, at the police station, Dan's boss finally releases Fu Jun. Because of the investigation, the poor man hadn't been able to do any deliveries all day. Dan's boss feels guilty and tries to give him some money. But Fu Jun refuses to take the money and leaves after just saying thank you. To recover the lost time, Fu Jun keeps making deliveries continuously all day. He's running from one place to another without any rest. Then suddenly, during one delivery, his body gives out. Because of exhaustion and pressure, Fu Jun has a heart attack and falls in the street. He dies. When Dan's boss gets this news, he breaks down. He feels that if he hadn't kept Fu Jun in interrogation for so long, then perhaps he'd be alive today. He calls Dan and tells him that nothing was found in that cake either, the one they'd investigated so thoroughly, and that another innocent man has lost his life. Hearing this, Dan too falls silent. He realizes that the time loop is affecting not only the suspects, but innocent people as well. He promises himself that in the next loop, he will definitely save Fu Jun's life. As evening falls, Dan and his whole team arrive at the wedding venue. When Lisa makes her entrance there, Dan just keeps looking at her for a few moments. Outside her lab coat and the office environment, Lisa looks completely different. Several of MoMA's important executives and shareholders are also present at the wedding. Lisa is officially introduced to everyone as the company's new research leader. Seeing this, some people are happy, especially Yu Xia and Han Yufei. Then the ceremony begins, and for a while everything seems normal. But Dan knows that in the previous loop, the blast had happened at exactly this time. As soon as the cake-cutting moment arrives, the bride suddenly delays coming onto the stage. Then a scream echoes through the hall. Everyone sees that a man has taken the bride hostage and is holding a knife to her throat. The groom tries to save her, but the attacker stabs him in the hand. The entire hall descends into panic. Dan immediately takes control of the situation. He orders his team to maintain security on the VIP guests and Yuji, and he himself moves toward the attacker. Trying to reach the hostage, Dan talks with the attacker, but the man says that the bride betrayed him and that he'll turn this wedding into a funeral. The situation could have gone out of control in seconds. When the attacker starts to attack Dan with the knife too, Dan is forced to draw his gun and shoots him in the legs. Everyone is in shock. But the most astonished of all is Lisa. For the first time, she had seen Dan not as an ordinary bodyguard, but as a trained officer. The attacker is taken into custody, and the guests are safely evacuated. During this, Han Yufei also comes to Dan and requests him to find his father's killer. Dan doesn't exactly promise him, but he takes his words seriously. During the interrogation at the police station, another shocking discovery is made. An LSD patch is found on the attacker's neck. This wasn't any normal sticker.
It was a powerful, mind-altering substance that could manipulate a person's emotions and behavior. Dan immediately checks the CCTV footage, and in no time, a mysterious man comes into view. A man wearing a hat had spoken with the attacker a few minutes earlier, and at that very moment had placed that patch on his neck. When Dan looks at the recording of that man, an old memory flashes in his mind. This was the same man who had appeared as a delivery worker on the day of Shenrong's death. He takes that CCTV image and runs to his car and begins searching the man's identity in the police database.
A countdown is running. He has only a few seconds left because it's about to strike 12 o'clock at night, and the third loop is about to begin. The database finally reveals a name, Yu Kun. Dan is still looking at his name and details when suddenly the world resets again, and the third loop has begun. This time, the opening moments of the loop are even more interesting. We see Lisa asleep in the lab. Another mysterious woman opens her eyes in the hospital, and Fu Jun too appears alive again. Dan understands that he has gotten one more chance. This time, he calls an emergency meeting early in the morning and puts Yu Kun's name directly on the table. He orders the team that this man must be found at any cost. But the problem is that his information practically doesn't exist in the database. Only one old address is found, which was demolished 2 years ago. Even so, Dan doesn't stop the investigation. He gives everyone their assignments as in the previous loop and starts focusing on Yuji himself. But here he notices another problem. In the previous loop, Yuji used to do boxing practice every morning. Today, he isn't doing it. This small difference becomes a very big signal for Dan, because in his view, such changes shouldn't come into the timeline without some external influence. On investigating, it turns out that Yuji hadn't slept all night. He was busy with calls and messages until 4 o'clock in the morning. And the most shocking thing, that night he had contacted only one person, Lisa. Dan immediately asks who had initiated the conversation. When the answer comes that Lisa had sent the first message, the expressions on Dan's face change. Now a new question had been born in his mind. Does Lisa know about the time loop too? Now, in the next scene, Dan arrives at MoMA with Yuji. But this time, everything feels a little different. Opposite to the previous loop, Lisa doesn't come to meet him. There's no private meeting, and she isn't seen in the office either. Meanwhile, another interesting change is seen. Fu Jun comes to the HR department for his unpaid compensation. In the previous loops, his complaint had been ignored. But this time, the HR head's attitude is completely changed. She politely tells him that his money will be transferred within 2 to 3 days. Fu Jun is astonished when he learns that someone had sent a complaint letter to Yuji in his name. It's because of this letter that the issue has been solved. But Fu Jun claims that he never wrote any such letter. This little mystery gets registered in Dan's mind. A little later, Dan learns that Yuji has given Lisa an important task. A foreign investor, Maggie, has arrived in the city, and Lisa has gone to receive her from the airport. The most surprising thing is that Lisa's promotion has already happened too, without the emotional conversation that had taken place in the previous loop, meaning that events are going in the same direction, but the route by which they get there is changing. The shareholders' meeting also proceeds almost as in the previous loop. Yuji officially announces Lisa in the research leadership role, and, as expected, Yufei again gives an emotional reaction. But Dan's focus is now on something else. From Lisa and Maggie's conversation on the way from the airport, it turns out that the two already know each other. Their friendship had formed during an exchange program. Maggie openly says that her investment firm has been interested in MoMA for quite some time. On the surface, everything seems normal, but Maggie's expressions sometimes become so mysterious that it seems she hasn't come only for business. Dan is analyzing the messages that had been exchanged between Lisa and Yuji. He learns that Lisa had started the conversation. It was she who had informed Yuji about Maggie's investment interest. Then suddenly, Dan understands another dangerous connection. The moment he looks at the time, an alarm goes off in his mind. It's 10:13 right now, and in the previous loop, at 10:15, there had been a deadly accident on the highway in which 3 people were killed. The worst part is that Lisa and Maggie are traveling on that very route. Now Dan calls Lisa without wasting any time and asks for her exact location. Then he tells her to forcibly change the route. The driver refuses at first because the new route is longer, but Dan shouts with such urgency that the driver has to give in. A few minutes later, from a distance, Lisa and Maggie see a horrible highway crash. Both are left in shock. Maggie immediately asks who the man giving orders on the phone was. Lisa tells her that he's a friend of hers. On the other side, Kai, an officer of Dan's investigation team, is searching the whole city for Yu Kun. During the investigation, he finds an old stunt performer who tells him that Yu Kun was an expert in martial arts
and used to work in the film industry as a stuntman. This lead takes Kai to a movie studio.
But Yu-kun isn't found there either. Meanwhile, Lisa and Maggie get stuck in traffic. This is the same place where a suicide incident had occurred earlier. So that Maggie's time isn't wasted, Lisa changes the meeting location, and everyone makes a plan to meet at a cafe. Dan immediately feels the situation is risky. He sends the other members of his team, Feng Lu and Ho Xin, to the cafe for undercover surveillance. Meanwhile, outside the office, Xia tries to manipulate Teng Jing into coming over to her side. She says that at MoMA the researchers are getting too much power, and that Teng Jing will never be able to become as important as Lisa. Teng Jing doesn't accept what she says, but a doubt is certainly planted in her heart. At the cafe, everyone finally meets. The investor begins the meeting. Everything seems normal. Just then, Feng Lu notices two masked customers. At first, they seem suspicious, but on removing their masks, it turns out that one of them is a famous celebrity. And at this very moment, an old memory comes back to Dan. In one loop, a stampede had broken out at this very cafe because of a celebrity sighting, and quite a few people had been injured. The instant this thought enters his mind, a sea of fans outside starts running toward the cafe. The situation turns chaotic in seconds. In this very crowd, Yu-kun slips into the cafe and throws smoke bombs. The whole area fills with smoke. People start running in panic. Dan, his team, and Yuji together begin evacuating the civilians safely. Dan secures Lisa first. Then, while he's taking Maggie out, his eyes fall on Yu-kun, who is getting close to Yuji. Dan shouts loudly. Yu-kun goes on alert and takes off. Dan chases him and reaches a mall. Using martial arts and combat skills, he finally catches Yu-kun. Putting the gun to his head, Dan looks into his eyes. He deliberately pulls the trigger. The gun doesn't fire, but Yu-kun's reaction troubles Dan even more. He was terrified of death. This was the very moment Dan had been waiting for. If Yu-kun were also a time loop traveler, he shouldn't have had any fear of death. Dan asks him, "Are you afraid of death?" Yu-kun says, "Who isn't afraid?" And from this very answer, Dan gets an important clue. Yu-kun might be the killer, but he isn't the mastermind. A little later, Kai arrives there and takes Yu-kun into custody. Dan orders him that within 5 minutes Yu-kun be brought before Yuji. After that, Dan comes back to Lisa and asks whether she's all right. Maggie thanks him and says she'll never forget his help. Dan politely replies that he was only doing his duty. Then he jokingly says to Lisa that he saved her life too. "Won't you remember me?" Lisa smiles and says that she'll remember him as well. This small moment makes the chemistry between the two even stronger. After the meeting, Maggie honestly admits that MoMA is going through a difficult time, but she has come to like the company and its people. She promises that she will definitely discuss the investment proposal at headquarters. Just then, Yu-kun is brought before everyone. Dan carefully observes every face. Yuji, Lisa, Maggie, all of their expressions. But no reaction seems suspicious. Either everyone really is innocent, or someone is a very talented actor. At night, during the interrogation, Yu-kun denies all the crimes. He says that he ran only because the police had come after him. And on the other side, Xia receives an anonymous message. The message contains photos of Maggie, Lisa, and Yuji's meeting. Seeing this, her expressions change. But we still can't tell whether she's good or bad. In the final moments of the episode, Lisa mentions that she'd received a message from Maggie that morning, and that it was Maggie who had asked Lisa for the meeting. Dan arrives at another shocking realization. It wasn't Lisa, but Maggie who had created the first change in the timeline. Her message was the reason the direction of the whole day changed. But when Dan has Maggie's background checked, her records come back completely clean. No criminal history, no suspicious connections. Dan realizes that perhaps he's looking for answers in the wrong place. It's possible that Squid is deliberately leading him in the wrong direction. And if Squid also understands the time loops, then perhaps all the previous loops were merely a diversion, so that by the time the real plan is executed in the final loop, Dan would already be far too late. Then we see Lisa. Early in the morning, she's sitting beside her mother, who lies in a coma at the hospital. Talking to her mother, she says that she has learned to make her favorite dish, and that she should just open her eyes once. She'll cook it herself and feed it to her. Dr. Chen explains to her that miracles don't happen so easily. In all these years, there has been no significant improvement in her mother's brain functions, and perhaps she should now accept reality. But Lisa isn't willing to give up. She's certain that her research will one day make the impossible possible. On the other side, Loop Day 3 is continuing, and Dan is setting off with Yuji for the LV Bay University lecture. Compared to the previous few loops, Yuji's behavior was seeming different. He appears more emotional and determined than before. Meanwhile, at MoMA, an important conversation takes place between Lisa and Tang Jing. Tang Jing congratulates Lisa on her promotion, and the two discuss the research project. Then the story takes an interesting turn. Dan's team is talking about him during lunch. Everyone has noticed that Dan always knows impossible details in advance. Some think he can see the future, and some think his dreams predict the future. At this same time, Lisa gets higher access to MoMA's restricted research database. She tries to check old files, especially information connected to 2016. But some files are inaccessible, and some records are found missing. This gives another signal that some old secrets are hidden inside the company. After that, Dan arrives at the research facility to meet Lisa. Going into the restricted area, he asks her casual questions, but in reality, he's verifying her midnight activities. Lisa tells him that she was in the lab all night because there had suddenly been changes in the data of her experiments. Then Lisa reveals something shocking. After 2 o'clock at night, when she went to the hospital, she saw unusual brain activity in her mother's EEG readings. She thinks her experimental drug is finally working. Lisa says that perhaps her mother's brain is responding. Dr. Chen reminds her that sometimes a patient can be mentally conscious while the body is completely paralyzed. But even this is a ray of hope for Lisa. She promises that she'll bring her mother back completely. Dan hears all of this and understands that Lisa too has her own personal battles. A little later, Dan learns that Lisa is also going to the LV Bay University lecture. This raises his tension even further, because in every one of Squid's attacks, Lisa is now becoming involved in one way or another. As soon as they reach the university, Dan assigns his team their positions. Kai is given security for Yuji and Lisa. Ku Sheng covers the outer perimeter, and Feng Lu gets the order to keep an eye on Professor Yu Xiang. The lecture begins, and Yuji inspires the students about technology and the future of genetic medicine. But during this very time, Yu Kun's interrogation is taking place at the police station. Dan asks him directly, who was behind the murders of MoMA's executives, Han Sheng and Tang Shu-rong? But Yu Kun denies everything. Then Dan uses a psychological trick. He brings up the time loop. As soon as the talk of midnight and loops comes out, Yu Kun's expressions change. For a second, it seems that he knows something, but then he composes himself. Now, it's almost confirmed for Dan that Yu Kun is only a pawn. The real mastermind is someone else. At the university, the lecture is going on smoothly. When Lisa is introduced on stage, she confidently gives a speech on the future of genetic technology, and the audience is quite impressed. Just then, a student stands up in the lecture hall and starts asking Yuji aggressive questions. He raises questions about the safety of the Oron technology and says that MoMA is suppressing the voices of some scientists. The discussion slowly turns into a debate. Then that student makes another allegation. He says that Ren has taken people's lives, and that the murders of MoMA's executives were perhaps also carried out to hide this very secret. The entire hall goes into shock, but the real attack was still to come. Suddenly, a live video starts playing on everyone's phones and screens. In the video, Professor Yu Xiang appears. He has taken a young female student hostage. Chaos breaks out across the whole auditorium. Professor Yu directly asks Yuji whether he remembers the place where it all happened. Footage of an underground lab is shown on the screen. In front of the public, Professor Yu accuses Yuji of having murdered his mentor, Jiang Yuwen, years ago, and of having destroyed the evidence in that same underground lab. As soon as they hear this accusation, the whole hall goes numb. Dan immediately starts tracking the location, and the security teams are activated. Inside the video, Professor Yu forces Yuji to confess and threatens that if the truth doesn't come out, the hostage could lose her life. But Dan isn't looking at the situation merely as a hostage crisis. He feels that Professor Yu knows something else, something directly connected to Squid's plan. Dan slowly tries to work on him. Professor Yu is on the edge of an emotional breakdown. He says again and again that Jiang Yuwen's sudden disappearance was no missing person case. It was murder, and Yuji is responsible for that murder. Yuji repeatedly denies all of this. Meanwhile, Dan promises him that he will definitely get to the truth, but that he should let the hostage go. Then, looking toward Dan, he says, "You're not like the other police officers. You're different." And the very next moment, Professor Yu makes a decision that shakes everyone. He's about to kill that hostage when Feng Lu fires at him, and the professor dies right there, and everyone goes into shock. Then we see a powerful flashback, in which we're shown a university scene from 9 years ago as well. Here we see that Yuji was a young and ambitious researcher who wanted to do something big in the field of genetics. He goes again and again to the legendary scientist Professor Jiang Yuan, requesting to become his PhD student, but the professor rejects him each time. He believed that Yuji has talent, but the real journey of genetic research is so long and difficult that perhaps his dreams would never be fulfilled. But Yuji doesn't accept defeat. He goes to him every day. He shows him his research papers and keeps proving his dedication. Finally, one day, Professor Jiang is impressed by his research and observation skills and takes him on as his student. It's from here that the journey of the two of them begins. In the flashback, Professor Yu is seen giving a strange scientific lecture. They talk about the biological clocks and time patterns present in nature. Studying the growth cycles of birds, insects, trees, and coral reefs, he had uncovered a disturbing anomaly. In some coral samples, more than 400 growth rings were appearing within a single year, instead of 365. This observation was deeply disturbing him, because according to science, it was impossible. At the time, this seems like just a scientific mystery, but we come to understand that its connection could be to the secret of the time loop. The story then returns to the present timeline, to that moment when Professor Yu is about to kill the hostage and Feng Lu fires at him, and the professor dies right there. Police officer Feng Lu is broken by guilt, because she feels that perhaps the professor's death happened because of her. Dan explains to her that she did exactly what any responsible police officer should have done. But deep inside, Dan too is troubled. Another person has died, and the mystery of the time loop has grown deeper. Meanwhile, another shocking piece of news arrives. Fu Jun, the same ordinary delivery rider whom Dan had been trying to save in the earlier loop, dies in a traffic accident. Dan can't understand why. Every time he tries to save someone, that person's fate becomes even more tragic. Dan's mind was now working in two directions. On one side are the secrets of Yuji and MoMA biotech, and on the other side are the unpredictable consequences of the time loop. Over at the police department too, the situation was getting complicated. Dan's boss, Huang, learns that Dan is hiding some information from him. Yuji is officially interrogated, and he tells his side of the story. According to him, Jiang was his mentor and idol. In the beginning, he respected him a great deal and wanted to learn from him. But slowly, conflicts began growing between them. One day, Yuji asked permission to make his groundbreaking research public, but Professor Jiang tore up his paper and accused him of looking for shortcuts. The professor believed that there are no shortcuts in science. Yuji claims that at the time, he felt the professor had become jealous of him. After that, he made the decision to change mentors. But before that could happen, the incident of the lab fire and Jiang's mysterious disappearance occurred. With full confidence, Yuji says that he never killed the professor. Police records, surveillance footage, and witnesses all confirm that he never even went inside the lab on the day of the incident. His question is simple. If he committed murder, then where is the body? And if the body was never even found, then how will the death be proven? Dan listens to what he says, but isn't fully convinced. During this same time, another lead comes to light. Surveillance equipment is found in the bag of a fake student caught in the auditorium incident. The investigation reveals that someone was secretly monitoring the participants at the auditorium. Messages were being exchanged from an unknown number, and someone had already been keeping an eye on the whole event. Dan's suspicion slowly begins to grow toward the people around Yuji. He questions Yuji's wife, Sha, as well. At first, Sha denies everything, but on Dan's repeated insistence, she accepts that she had surveillance carried out on all three of them: Han Sheng, Tang Shurong, and Yuji. Her reason was simple. In her view, these people had become less scientists and more businessmen. A power game was going on inside the company, and she wanted to understand who was actually controlling that game. The most shocking thing is when Sha says that before the deaths of Han Sheng and Tang Shurong, Yuji was behaving very strangely. In the dark of night, he would repeatedly go secretly into MoMA Biotech's restricted areas. Sha followed him herself and saw that he spends hours in the company's underground research section, and she had also seen Lisa coming out from there. She suspected that Yuji and Lisa were dating. This information becomes very important for Dan, because even earlier he had noticed that something is going on in Moma's restricted labs that isn't officially recorded. Sha makes one more shocking confession. When Dan asks her directly whether she wants to kill Yuji, at first she laughs it off, but a few seconds later her expression changes completely, and then she looks straight into Dan's eyes and says that yes, she wants to kill Yuji. And friends, the story hasn't ended here. In fact, the real game is about to begin now. In the first 8 episodes, all that Dan and Lisa knew was that they're trapped in a mysterious time loop. But now they slowly begin to realize that behind this loop isn't merely an accident, but a dangerous secret that is years old. In the next episodes, such shocking secrets will come to light that they'll turn the whole story upside down. Some of the people who were trusted the most are the very ones hiding the biggest secrets. And the one you've been considering the villain until now, it's possible that he isn't the real mastermind either. The biggest question is, will Dan and Lisa be able to get out of this endless loop, or will time, as it does every time, pull them back into the same day again?